A black child gasping for breath, an ambulance racing against time, its path deliberately blocked by a racist cop on a power trip. He sneered at the frantic mother, dismissed the paramedic's pleas, enjoying his momentary dominance, unaware of the storm brewing. The child's life hung in the balance, but a desperate 911 call from inside the ambulance, patched straight to the highest levels, unleashed a fury so swift that the officer was fired before the ambulance, rerouted and delayed, even reached the hospital. Friends, welcome. Today's story is a harrowing journey into a moment where prejudice threatened the most innocent of lives, and where every second counted in a battle against both a medical crisis and an abuse of power. It's a stark reminder of the devastating impact of bias in critical situations. If you believe in the power of truth to triumph and the urgent need for accountability, please subscribe and activate your notifications. Your support helps us share these vital, often unsettling narratives. Thank you for joining us as we explore this race against time. The piercing shriek of an asthma attack ripped through the small, lovingly decorated apartment of Sarah Washington, a single mother who worked 2 jobs to provide for her 7-year-old son, Leo. Leo, a bright-eyed boy with an infectious laugh and a passion for drawing superheroes, was now anything but super. His small chest heaved, his lips tinged with a terrifying blue, each gasp for air a desperate failing struggle. Sarah, her heart hammering against her ribs with a primal fear, snatched up Leo's emergency inhaler, but it offered little relief. This was a bad one, the kind that sent icy tendrils of panic coiling around her soul. She'd seen it before. She knew what she had to do. Her fingers, trembling, fumbled with her phone as she dialed 911. Her voice a choked plea for help. "My son, Leo Washington, 7 years old. Severe asthma attack. He can't breathe. Please hurry." The Oak Haven City paramedics were dispatched with commendable speed. Unit 73, staffed by veteran paramedic David "Davy" Ramirez and his younger, equally dedicated partner Chloe Jensen, navigated the late afternoon traffic with practiced skill, their siren clearing a path through the urban sprawl. They knew the Washington's neighborhood, a predominantly black working-class enclave, often underserved by city resources but rich in community spirit. They also knew that for a child in acute respiratory distress, every single minute was a lifetime. Leo's hidden power in this life-or-death drama was tragically ironic. It was his sheer, unadulterated innocence, his vulnerability as a child gasping for breath, a universally understood symbol of helplessness that should have transcended any barrier, any prejudice. And the secondary but ultimately decisive power would be the unwavering professionalism and quick thinking of paramedic Ramirez, a man who understood that sometimes saving a life meant fighting battles on more than one front. As Ambulance 73, lights flashing, siren wailing, turned onto the final stretch of road leading to the Washington's apartment complex, they encountered an unexpected and infuriating obstacle. A police cruiser, Oak Haven PD Car 112, was parked haphazardly, angled in such a way that it completely blocked the narrow residential street. There was no accident scene, no ongoing police incident, just the cruiser, its engine idling, and one officer, Patrolman Alistair Finch, leaning against its hood, nonchalantly scrolling through his phone. Officer Finch was a man whose bitterness and racial prejudices were as deeply ingrained as the creases on his uniform. He was a relatively new transfer to this precinct, a consequence of too many citizen complaints and attitudinal issues at his previous assignment in a more affluent, whiter part of the city. Instead of seeing the transfer as a chance to reform, Finch viewed it as a demotion, a punishment, and his resentment festered, often manifesting as petty abuses of power against the residents of the community he now begrudgingly served. He had a particular disdain for what he considered the constant drama and entitlement of the neighborhood, and the sound of an approaching siren often triggered in him not a sense of urgency to assist, but an irritable sigh and a desire to assert his own, often unnecessary, authority. He saw the approaching ambulance, heard its desperate wail, but instead of immediately clearing the path, a perverse, ugly thought seemed to take root. Let them wait. Let them see who's in charge here. Paramedic Ramirez laid on his air horn, a series of short, urgent blasts. Officer Finch looked up from his phone, his expression one of annoyance rather than concern. He made no move to reposition his cruiser. Ramirez, his frustration mounting, keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Ambulance 73. We have a police vehicle, car 112, blocking our access to a pediatric Code 3 respiratory distress on Elm Street. Officer is non-responsive to signals. Child is critical. Request immediate assistance to clear roadway. Chloe Jensen, in the passenger seat, was already unbuckling her seatbelt, her medical kit at the ready, her eyes wide with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What is he doing?" she muttered, her voice tight. "Doesn't he see us? Doesn't he hear us?" Officer Finch, with an exaggerated theatrical slowness, finally pushed himself off the hood of his car and sauntered towards the ambulance, his posture radiating an arrogant indifference to their flashing lights and screaming siren. He was about to transform a medical emergency into a standoff fueled by pure, unadulterated malice, with a 7-year-old boy's life hanging precariously in the balance. The seconds he was stealing were not just numbers on a clock. They were stolen breaths from a dying child. The confrontation at the impromptu blockade on Elm Street was as surreal as it was infuriating. Paramedic David Ramirez, a man whose entire career was dedicated to preserving life against the relentless tick of the clock, found himself face to face with a police officer whose casual indifference was a direct assault on that mission. Officer Alistair Finch approached Ambulance 73 with an almost leisurely gait, his expression a mixture of boredom and a simmering resentment, as if the emergency vehicle itself were a personal affront. "Problem paramedics?" Finch drawled, his voice laced with a sarcasm that was utterly out of place, given the screaming siren and flashing lights. He deliberately ignored the urgency in Ramirez's earlier horn blasts. Ramirez leaned out of the driver's side window, his own voice tight with a barely suppressed urgency. "Officer Finch, we have a 7-year-old child in severe respiratory distress just up the block. He can't breathe. You are blocking our access. We need you to move your vehicle immediately." Finch made a show of looking around, as if just noticing the ambulance for the first time. "Blocking access, am I?" he mused, hooking his thumbs into his duty belt. "Well, now, that's unfortunate, but you see, I'm conducting a routine patrol of this area. Got to ensure community safety, you know. Can't just have ambulances barreling through without due regard." Chloe Jensen, unable to contain her disbelief, leaned across Ramirez. "Officer, with all due respect, this is due regard. We are responding to a pediatric Code 3. A child's life is at stake. Every second you delay us, his condition worsens." Her voice was sharp, her paramedics' training battling against the sheer irrationality of Finch's behavior. Finch's eyes, cold and reptilian, flickered towards Chloe, then settled back on Ramirez. He seemed to almost relish the power he held in this moment, the ability to control the fate of unseen others. "A child, you say? You sure it's not just another overreaction? We get a lot of those in this neighborhood, people calling 911 for every little sniffle." The racist undertone, the dismissive generalization, was unmistakable and utterly vile. Ramirez felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage, but he fought it down. Arguing, escalating, would only waste more precious seconds. Leo Washington didn't have seconds to spare. "Officer," he said, his voice dangerously low, forcing a calmness he didn't feel, "I assure you, this is a legitimate, life-threatening emergency. I have been a paramedic in this city for 15 years. I know the difference. Now, are you going to move your vehicle, or am I going to have to request your supervisor to order you to do so?" Finch actually smirked, a contemptuous curl of his lip. "Threats, paramedic? That's not very professional. Maybe I should run your plates. Make sure this ambulance isn't, borrowed." He was playing a game, a sick, twisted power game, and Leo Washington was the pawn. Just then, Sarah Washington, Leo's mother, appeared at the end of the street, her face a mask of terror. She had heard the ambulance siren, then heard it stop abruptly, and a new, even more desperate fear had gripped her. She saw the police car blocking the ambulance, saw the officer in a standoff with the paramedics, and she began to run towards them, her voice a frantic cry. "Leo, my baby, he can't breathe. Please, let them through, please." She reached the scene, breathless, tears streaming down her face, her eyes fixed on the paramedics with a desperate appeal. "He's turning bluer. The inhaler isn't working. Please, you have to help him." Officer Finch looked at Sarah, a young, distraught black mother, and his expression, if anything, hardened further. Her desperation, her plea, seemed to only confirm his preconceived notions, his callous indifference. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," he said, his tone patronizing. "We're handling the situation. Your emergency will be attended to in due course." "In due course?" Sarah shrieked, her voice cracking with disbelief and anguish. "He doesn't have due course. He needs help now. What is wrong with you? Are you even human?" Ramirez, seeing Sarah's utter distress and knowing that Leo's window of opportunity was closing with terrifying speed, made a critical decision. He couldn't physically move Finch's cruiser. He couldn't waste any more time arguing with this intransigent, prejudiced officer. He had to bypass him somehow. He keyed his radio again, his voice now stripped of all pretense of politeness, resonating with cold, hard fury and utter desperation. "Dispatch, this is Paramedic Ramirez, Unit 73 at Elm Street. I am formally declaring Officer Finch of Car 112 as actively obstructing a life-saving medical intervention for a pediatric critical patient. He is refusing to clear the roadway, despite repeated requests and the presence of the patient's mother confirming the emergency. I need a direct patch to the on-duty police shift commander or the highest-ranking available OPD supervisor, Code 3. This officer's actions are directly endangering a child's life. I repeat, he is going to kill this child if we don't get through now." The radio silence from dispatch lasted only a fraction of a second, but it felt like an eternity. Then a different voice, calmer, more authoritative, came over the air. "Unit 73, this is Captain Davies, OPD Shift Commander. I am patched in. Paramedic Ramirez, report Officer Finch's badge number and confirm your current assessment of the patient's status and the officer's actions." Finch, hearing his name and the direct address to a police captain over the paramedic's radio, finally seemed to realize that his petty power play had escalated far beyond his control. A flicker of unease, perhaps even fear, crossed his face. He had been so focused on bullying the paramedics and the distraught mother that he hadn't considered the possibility of them going over his head so directly, so publicly, to his own command. Ramirez, his eyes never leaving Finch's, recited the officer's badge number clearly. "Captain Davies' patient is a 7-year-old male. Acute asthmatic crisis, severe hypoxia, cyanotic. Officer Finch, badge 8814, has his vehicle positioned to completely block access to the patient's residence. He has been on scene for approximately 7 minutes, has been repeatedly advised of the critical nature of the call and has refused all requests to move his vehicle, instead engaging in dismissive and accusatory dialogue. He is, in my professional medical opinion, directly and willfully impeding our ability to render life-saving aid. The mother is on scene, hysterical, confirming the child's deteriorating condition. "We are losing time we do not have, Captain." The condemnation in Ramirez's voice was absolute. He wasn't just a paramedic reporting an obstruction. He was an experienced medical professional accusing a police officer of actions that could lead to a child's death. The hidden power here was the undeniable truth of the medical emergency, the sanctity of a child's life, and the unwavering courage of a paramedic willing to risk a confrontation with law enforcement to uphold his oath. Officer Finch's world, built on a foundation of petty tyranny and racial bias, was about to come crashing down around him, with the life of a 7-year-old boy hanging in the balance. The words of paramedic Ramirez, broadcast not just to Captain Davies but likely monitored by multiple units and dispatchers, hung in the charged air like an indictment. Officer Alistair Finch stood frozen, the color draining from his face as the full weight of Ramirez's accusation, directly endangering a child's life, registered. His smug arrogance, his petty enjoyment of power, evaporated, replaced by a dawning, sickening terror. He had catastrophically misjudged the situation, his ingrained prejudice leading him down a path that now threatened not only his career, but potentially his freedom if the child died due to his deliberate delay. Captain Davies's voice crackled back over Ramirez's radio, no longer calm, but laced with an icy fury that sent a shiver down even Ramirez's spine. "Officer Finch, badge 88-4, this is Captain Davies. You are ordered, you are commanded, to move your vehicle and clear that roadway immediately. You are to render any and all assistance requested by Paramedic Unit 73. You are to make no further statements or take any independent action. Acknowledge this order, Officer Finch, now." Finch fumbled for his own radio, his hand shaking so violently he could barely key the microphone. Yes, Captain Davies, roger that. Clearing the roadway now, sir," he stammered, his voice a pathetic shadow of its earlier arrogance. He scrambled into his cruiser, no longer sauntering but moving with a clumsy, panicked haste. He threw the car into reverse, tires screeching as he hastily backed up, finally clearing the path for Ambulance 73. Ramirez didn't wait for an apology or any further interaction with Finch. He slammed the ambulance into drive, sirens still wailing, and sped the remaining few hundred feet to the Washington's apartment building, Chloe Jensen already leaping out with the pediatric jump kit before they'd even come to a complete stop. Sarah Washington, sobbing with a mixture of terror and desperate hope, met them at the door, leading them to where Leo lay on the sofa, his breathing shallow, his small body frighteningly still. The paramedics worked with swift, desperate efficiency. Oxygen mask, nebulizer treatment with albuterol and ipratropium, IV line for emergency medications. Leo's condition was critical. His oxygen saturation levels were dangerously low. Every second Finch had stolen was a second Leo might not get back. As they worked, Ramirez was vaguely aware of other police units arriving on scene, of Captain Davies himself pulling up, his face a thundercloud, but his focus and Chloe's was entirely on their small, fragile patient. After several agonizing minutes of intensive treatment, Leo's breathing began to ease just slightly. A faint tinge of pink returned to his lips. It wasn't a full recovery, not by a long shot, but it was a sign. "We need to transport now," Ramirez barked, and they carefully but quickly transferred Leo to the gurney, Sarah clutching her son's small hand, her face a mask of anguish. As they rushed Leo out to the waiting ambulance, Captain Davies intercepted Ramirez briefly. "Paramedic Ramirez," Davies said, his voice tight with controlled fury, his eyes like chips of ice. "Thank you. Your professionalism under these outrageous circumstances is commendable. Be assured, Officer Finch's conduct will be dealt with, severely and immediately. My priority now is your patient and supporting your efforts." Ramirez simply nodded, his expression grim. "Let's just hope we're not too late, Captain." The ride to Oakhaven Children's Hospital was a blur of flashing lights and intense medical intervention. Chloe managed Leo's airway while Ramirez administered further medications, constantly monitoring his vitals, his heart aching with every labored breath the little boy took. Sarah Washington sat beside her son, whispering words of love and encouragement, her terror a palpable presence in the back of the ambulance. They arrived at the hospital's pediatric emergency department, where a full trauma team was waiting, alerted by Ramirez's pre-arrival radio report. Leo was whisked away, Sarah following, her face a tear-streaked prayer. Ramirez and Chloe stood for a moment in the chaotic bay, the adrenaline slowly ebbing, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and a simmering rage at Officer Finch's unconscionable actions. The news of what had transpired on Elm Street, however, was already exploding within the Oakhaven City administration and the police department. Captain Davies, true to his word, had immediately initiated a full internal affairs investigation into Officer Alistair Finch. He had also personally contacted the police chief, the mayor's office, and the city's legal counsel. The 911 call logs, the dispatch recordings, including Ramirez's damning accusations and Davies's direct order to Finch, and the automatic vehicle locator AVL data from Finch's cruiser and ambulance 73 provided an irrefutable timeline of the deliberate obstruction. There were also multiple witnesses, Chloe Jensen, Sarah Washington, and several neighbors who had seen Finch blocking the ambulance and had heard parts of the confrontation. The hidden power that truly sealed Finch's fate, beyond the immediate intervention of Captain Davies, was the sheer, unambiguous wrongness of his actions, captured and amplified by the official record and the unwavering testimony of medical professionals. There was no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. He had willfully endangered a child's life out of what could only be described as petty malice and racial prejudice. Police Chief Mike Thompson, a man already under pressure to implement reforms and improve community relations, knew this was a ticking time bomb. An officer deliberately blocking an ambulance carrying a critically ill black child in a neighborhood already sensitive to police misconduct. It was a public relations inferno waiting to happen, and more importantly, it was a profound moral failing within his department. He also knew that if Leo Washington died, Officer Finch would likely face criminal charges, and the city would face a multi-million-dollar lawsuit they couldn't possibly win. Before Ambulance 73 delayed and rerouted, due to Finch's initial obstruction and the subsequent need to stabilize Leo for a longer-than-anticipated transport, even arrived at Oakhaven Children's Hospital, Chief Thompson made his decision. He convened an emergency command staff meeting via conference call. Based on Captain Davies's initial report, the dispatch recordings, and the sheer egregiousness of the offense, the chief invoked an emergency provision in the police union contract that allowed for immediate termination in cases of extreme misconduct that brought the department into severe disrepute or posed an ongoing threat to public safety. Thus, as paramedic Ramirez and Chloe Jensen were handing over Leo Washington's care to the pediatric ICU team, fighting to save his young life, a stunned Alistair Finch, who had been ordered to report directly to police headquarters, was being unceremoniously stripped of his badge and informed that his employment with the Oakhaven Police Department was terminated, effective immediately. He was fired before the full consequences of his actions, Leo's ultimate fate, were even known. The city and its police chief had decided they could not afford to wait. The act was so heinous, so indefensible, that his continued presence on the force was an intolerable liability. The swiftness of his termination was unprecedented, a testament to the sheer horror his actions had invoked at the highest levels. The news of Officer Alistair Finch's immediate termination, while stunning in its swiftness, was only the beginning of the fallout from his egregious actions on Elm Street. Little Leo Washington, thanks to the heroic efforts of paramedics Ramirez and Jensen and the dedicated team at Oakhaven Children's Hospital, pulled through. After several critical days in the pediatric intensive care unit, his breathing stabilized. The terrifying blue tinge left his lips, and his mischievous spark began to return. His recovery was deemed near miraculous by his doctors, who minced no words in stating that the minutes lost due to Finch's obstruction had pushed Leo to the very brink of irreversible brain damage or death. Sarah Washington, while overjoyed and profoundly grateful for her son's survival, was also filled with a cold, righteous anger. The trauma of watching her child gasp for breath while a police officer casually, cruelly blocked the path of those trying to save him was a wound that would not easily heal. Encouraged by community leaders and with the pro bono assistance of a prominent civil rights law firm, Sarah filed a multi-million-dollar federal lawsuit against Alistair Finch individually and the city of Oakhaven. The lawsuit alleged gross negligence, reckless endangerment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violations of Leo's civil rights due to racially motivated obstruction of emergency medical care. The city, facing irrefutable evidence from dispatch logs, AVL data, paramedic testimony, and Finch's own, now former, colleagues, knew it had no viable defense. The 911 call from paramedic Ramirez, patched directly to Captain Davies, became a key piece of evidence, its raw urgency and damning accusations painting a vivid picture of Finch's deliberate malice. The city's attorneys quickly moved to negotiate a settlement. The resulting agreement was one of the largest in Oakhaven's history for a case of police misconduct not involving a fatality. It included a substantial monetary sum for Leo's ongoing care and future well-being, a formal public apology from the mayor and the police chief to the Washington family, and, crucially, a commitment to systemic reforms within the Oakhaven Police Department. Alistair Finch, now a civilian, found himself a pariah. His firing was upheld despite a token appeal by his union. He faced not only the civil lawsuit, but also a criminal investigation by the district attorney's office for reckless endangerment and official oppression. While he ultimately avoided jail time, pleading to lesser charges that resulted in probation and a permanent revocation of his ability to work in law enforcement anywhere in the country, his life was irrevocably altered. His name became synonymous with callous indifference and racist abuse of power. The Finch incident, as it became known, served as a brutal but necessary wake-up call for the Oakhaven Police Department and the city administration. The reforms mandated by the settlement were far-reaching. They included enhanced emergency vehicle protocol. Strict new directives were issued regarding yielding to and assisting emergency vehicles, with severe penalties for any officer found to be impeding their progress without legitimate verifiable cause. Implicit bias and de-escalation retraining. All OPD officers were required to undergo intensive, ongoing training in implicit bias recognition, cultural competency, and de-escalation techniques, with a specific focus on interacting with citizens in crisis. Strengthened 911 dispatch protocols. Dispatchers were given clearer authority to immediately escalate reports of officer misconduct or obstruction directly to senior command staff, bypassing the normal chain if a life was at imminent risk. Paramedic Ramirez's quick thinking in demanding a direct patch became a model for this protocol. Community oversight and accountability. The city established a more robust civilian review board with greater investigative powers and a direct line to the mayor's office and city council to review complaints of police misconduct. Paramedics David Ramirez and Chloe Jensen were hailed as heroes, not just for their life-saving medical skills, but for their courage in confronting Officer Finch and escalating the situation to protect their patient. They received departmental commendations and public accolades, though both remained humble, insisting they were just doing their jobs. Their actions, particularly Ramirez's decisive 911 call from the scene, became a case study in paramedic training programs on how to handle obstruction by other emergency services personnel. Leo Washington, though he made a full physical recovery, carried the emotional scars of that terrifying day. His mother, Sarah, became a quiet but powerful advocate for police reform and better emergency medical access for underserved communities, using her settlement funds to establish a small foundation in Leo's name. The legacy of Alistair Finch's cruelty was a city forced to confront its demons, a police department compelled to undergo painful but necessary change, and a community reminded of the preciousness of every child's life and the moral courage required to protect it against all odds, even against those sworn to serve and protect. The siren of hate had been silenced by a code of courage, and the swift justice delivered, though born from a near tragedy, offered a glimmer of hope that accountability, when demanded loudly enough, could indeed arrive before it was too late. The horrifying act of Officer Alistair Finch, deliberately blocking an ambulance carrying a critically ill child, is a stark illustration of how prejudice, when coupled with authority, can become a lethal weapon. His callous disregard for a 7-year-old black child's life, his sneering dismissal of a frantic mother's pleas, and the paramedics' urgent warnings reveals a profound moral depravity and a sickening abuse of power. This was not a misunderstanding or a lapse in judgment. It was a willful obstruction born of racial animus and a petty desire to assert dominance, with a child's breaths hanging in the balance. This story underscores the critical, life-saving importance of unimpeded access for emergency medical services. Every second stolen by Finch's actions was a second Leo Washington teetered closer to death. The heroism in this narrative belongs not only to the medical professionals fighting to save Leo, but to paramedic David Ramirez, whose courage and quick thinking in directly reporting Finch's obstruction to a police captain via his own 911 dispatch was an extraordinary act of professional integrity and moral courage. He risked interagency conflict and potential repercussions to advocate for his patient, embodying the highest ideals of his profession. The swift termination of Officer Finch, even before the ambulance reached the hospital, is a testament to the undeniable egregiousness of his conduct and a rare but powerful example of immediate accountability when leadership is confronted with irrefutable evidence of extreme misconduct. The subsequent legal and systemic reforms forced upon the city of Oak Haven highlight the potential for positive change to emerge from even the most appalling incidents, provided there is the will to confront wrongdoing and implement meaningful solutions. The ultimate lesson here is a chilling reminder of the human cost of bias. It calls for rigorous, ongoing anti-racism and de-escalation training for all law enforcement, for clear and severe consequences for officers who abuse their authority, and for systems that empower other emergency professionals, like paramedic Ramirez, to challenge and report such misconduct without fear of retribution. Leo Washington's life was saved, but his story is a demand for a world where no child's breath, no citizen's life, is ever devalued or endangered by the prejudice of those in power. If this story of a race against time, a battle against prejudice, and the courage that saved a child's life has impacted you, please engage with our content. Like this video, subscribe for more vital narratives, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our updates. Share this story to raise awareness about the critical importance of unbiased emergency response. What are your thoughts on Officer Finch's actions and Paramedic Ramirez's bravery? Join the discussion in the comments below. Your voice helps us champion accountability and justice. Thank you for watching.